Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you start experiencing so many changes in this time of your life, whether it be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, or that weight gain around the middle that seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere despite you not changing anything. So you go back to those tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet nothing seems to be working. You're putting in all this effort and nothing to show for it, or the scale starts moving in the opposite direction than what you want. But we know now that your body is inherently different than what it was prior to you experiencing these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to really help you understand how your body changes in this time of your life so that you can reach those health and fitness goals, live a life full of vitality, feel in control and at home in this body of yours, and really, really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today I have the wonderful Coach Hannah here, our gut health queen, as I like to call her. We have been getting so many questions about pre and probiotics and should you take them and what do you take and how do you know and the brands and all these kinds of questions around nutrition in terms of like that kind of stuff. And we've talked about gut health in the past before, but we really want to delve into this whole like biotics of the gut health world because they're very trendy. Some are really cheap, some are really expensive. So we want to discuss the differences between all of those biotics that they talk about, what they're actually good for, what they might actually be bad for, because a lot of people don't think there's negative consequences when there is, how to get a good balance of everything, and so much more. As you can imagine, our podcasts are always filled with lots of education for you guys. So if you're not someone who has regular bowel movements, like at least once a day, or you have more than 3 bowel movements per day, that is not normal. That is not supposed to happen. You are supposed to go daily, 1 to 2 times. So I want you to listen closely to this episode so you can learn more about how to heal your gut, because I don't think people realize how much of an issue that is. We all think that like, oh, going to the restroom like every few days is totally fine. And no, there's a lot of stuff going on and you can achieve it. Our clients do achieve it. They feel amazing. I always say if you're pooping, you're happy. Like good bowel movements are great. If you're not pooping, you're usually in a bad mood. So we're going to dive into all of the things.
Yes. And if you're not comfortable talking about your poops, I always like to say you probably have poop issues if you're not comfortable talking about them. So talk about your poops, ask what your friends and your family members' poops look like. They might look at you crazy, but then eventually you guys will be like the Vitality team where we celebrate whenever we poop. And we always let each other know. So today, before we dive into these biotics, so your prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, synbiotics, let's first go over what these even are. So these are going to be our gut bacteria. And there are so many of these biotics in our gut. And this is crazy to think about. If you line up the bacteria in your gut one by one next to each other, they will stretch all the way to the moon. We have 39 trillion microorganisms that live inside of our colons. 39 trillion. In one individual teaspoon, there are over 500 billion individual gut bacteria. That is bonkers to think about. So even though there are so many in each of our guts, these same bacteria are actually considered endangered and on the endangered species list because there are 1/3 less bacteria in the standard gut today than in other very happy and healthy guts.
Yeah, and even if you are not eating, there will still be waste moving out of your body in the form of bowel movements, or at least there should be, because the gut microbiome is repopulating constantly. Like that's what it does. It's just constantly repopulating. So not only are we meant to move food waste through us, there is a constant waste from our gut microbiome in itself that should move out on a regular basis. The foods we create will change, or the foods that we eat will change the makeup of our gut straight away. So it is essential to create awareness around what we are consuming, so we can create a more predictable gut environment, allowing for optimal health. The gut and the brain are so connected. It's insane. There's so much more research now between like gut health and brain health and cognition and anxiety and depression, your ability to focus on all of these things. And it's really connected by what we like to kind of term like a direct highway in your body. So we really do become what we eat. And it's just so fascinating. Like there's always new research coming out on the gut and the brain and the connection. It's wild. It can be super overwhelming, but I think it's so cool. I think the body is amazing. Like I love this stuff.
I am obsessed with this gut-brain axis connection and how closely intertwined the health of our gut and the health of our brain are. It never, like, there are some things that I'll read and I already know. And when I read it again, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just so wild, even though I already knew this information. So, all of these different bacteria that are living inside of us are, well, bacteria, viruses, parasites, yeasts, and even archaea, which existed on our planet before oxygen did. That is crazy. So each of them are living single-celled organisms, and you may think viruses, bacteria, or yeast are bad, but we actually need all these in balance inside of us for our bowels to be the happiest that they can be. My eyes are watering so bad right now. If anybody is watching this, I'm not crying. My eyes are just watering. But parasites are typically something that we want to avoid, although pretty much everybody is guaranteed to have parasites living in us at all times, even though we're likely to be asymptomatic with these parasites. So like all of these things together help to create that balance inside of our gut microbiome.
So the different kinds of organisms are essential to a well-functioning gut. Each organism is involved in our digestion in some way, shape, or form and play a role. So the bacteria inside our gut help break down food and take out those nutrients, which allows us to benefit from the things that we eat. So if we're not actually extracting those nutrients, then we're not benefiting from that, right? We want to ensure we have a proper balance between the good and the bad bacteria in our gut, because there's always going to be both. We're always going to have both good and bad, and we need to have like an optimal balance between the two for our gut and our digestive tract to really function properly. And too much of the good guys can lead to dysbiosis. Not enough of the good guys can lead to dysbiosis, and vice versa. Like you can have too much of a good thing, you can have not enough. So we want the good to be good enough and the bad to be bad enough. That kind of makes sense. You need to have both. It's almost like that little yin and yang kind of relationship.
Yeah, so we'll talk about this good enough, bad enough relationship multiple times today, because it helps to conceptualize, okay, we need the good, we also need the bad. So when our gut is out of whack and we don't have enough of the good and enough of the bad bacteria, then we have like this balance, this dysbiosis, and that dysbiosis, which is really just like an imbalance of bacteria, whether it is too much or too little of one thing or another. That dysbiosis can then lead to inflammation, and then that inflammation can lead to leaky gut, because the more inflammation we have, if you interlace your fingers, that's kind of how our gut lining is created. Then as there's inflammation, they start to spread apart and they create these holes. So we want to avoid that, avoid the dysbiosis so that we can avoid the inflammation and keep those junctions nice and tight together, like you're squeezing your fingers nice and tight together. Because if you have this leaky gut, it can also lead to things like SIBO, which is really just small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, but of very specific bacteria, and can even lead to food sensitivities, which I don't know about you guys. I love food. I want to eat as many foods as possible without having any negative reactions to them. So we're not going to cover all of the different troubles that we can encounter from our gut because there's just way too many. So today, because we're talking about pre and probiotics and the other kinds of biotics that we've got going on, we're really going to focus on dysbiosis today as it's the most directly related to those different bacteria in our gut. Dysbiosis really is just like having that imbalance of the organisms in our microflora, our microbiome, our gut. All these words are the same thing for inside of our guts. And how we get here is by having too much of one thing and not enough of another, or intaking things that have the ability to knock out different bacteria in our gut. So we'll get to the specifics on how to feed or kill your bacteria in your gut here in a bit. But first, we're going to talk about the different kinds of biotics you may have heard talked about or seen advertisements for or purchased these things because you're like, oh, somebody said this is really great for my gut, but you actually have no idea what they are doing for you. So let's dive into those different categories now, and we're going to define them so that you guys know moving forward what we are referring to. So Steph, take it away.
Yeah, so the first one that we're going to talk about is prebiotics. This is something that a lot of people do take. They are live microorganisms that, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host or the person. So simply put, prebiotics are live microbes that are beneficial to us for our health. So some examples of prebiotics are things like whole grains. Yes, carbs. Shocking. Oh my goodness, I love this. Boiled and cooled legumes, peas and beans, Jerusalem artichokes, green bananas, onion. Love me some onion, love me some garlic, love leeks, love berries. Usually it's going to be a soluble fiber that is a prebiotic, while insoluble won't be, which is a nice way to kind of differentiate between the two. Typically, these are going to be foods that contain a type of fiber that we as humans cannot digest, yet the bacteria that's in our gut can feed on it. So it's important to have that. You may think, why would I eat food that I can't digest? That seems like a waste. And the answer is to feed the masses of bacteria in your gut. Remember, we talked about the trillions and millions that we have in our gut. We need to feed those so that they stay there. And feeding those are going to do so much more for you and your long-term health and avoiding foods that you as a human technically cannot, like, quote unquote, digest, right? There are also some non-fiber containing foods or substances that are prebiotics as well. And these are called polyphenols. So these are things like green tea, black tea, pomegranate, blueberries, and even cocoa have prebiotic phytochemical polyphenols in them, which can be great for you as well. So in summary, we've got some whole grains, get them carbs in ya. We got legumes, beans, peas, green bananas, onions, garlic, berries, green tea, black tea, pomegranate, even cocoa. So there's a good variety that you can have. So make sure you're eating some of those foods to get that prebiotic benefit to help feed that bacteria in your gut that is healthy, that is good, that we need in order for you to be healthy.
Yes. Love me some prebiotic foods. Next, we're going to talk about probiotics. So probiotics are a substrate that is selectively utilized by the host microorganism, us, that leads to a health benefit on the host, us. So in simple terms, probiotics are food for beneficial microbes that live in our gut and provide a health benefit. They must specifically provide a health benefit. So probiotics can be found in fermented foods like yogurt, sauerkraut, pickles, and any other fermented food, as long as it is a non-pasteurized fermented food, because pasteurization is a process that is only going to kill those beneficial bacteria. So we don't want to kill those bacteria. We want those. That's why we're eating these fermented foods. So always be sure to look for non-pasteurized when purchasing your fermented foods, your pickles, your kimchi, your sauerkraut, and things like that. So don't get me wrong. I love Vlasic dill pickles, especially the little snack pickles. But unfortunately, those are not providing those wonderfully beautiful, beneficial probiotic bacteria to our gut. So for the next biotic that we have, it is a synbiotic, so SYN. And I feel like a lot of people don't hear so much about these, but then a lot of people are asking me about seed, which is a daily synbiotic. And I feel like so many health or wellness podcasts are promoting seed these days. So that is what this is, a synbiotic. And this is a mixture that is made up of live microorganisms and substrates selectively utilized by the host microorganism, you, us, that confers a health benefit. So really what this means in simplicity is a prebiotic and a probiotic together that are defined by a complementary synbiotic benefiting your body. So think about combining the powers of prebiotics that Steph talked about and then probiotics that I just talked about. They're going to work together in synergy, hence synbiotic. And they also must be tested and proven to show that there is a health benefit to you. It can't just be like, oh, this prebiotic and probiotics together is a synbiotic. They must be tested in unison to show that they are working together for a benefit for you.
And I do want to touch super quickly on like what I talked about there for prebiotics. Like all those foods were carbs. So let's be very clear, like prebiotics were carbohydrates. If you're not having carbohydrates, this is why a lot of people end up with gut health issues down the road, is because like their gut bacteria literally cannot grow because you haven't been feeding them. So this is why, like, if you've done low carb for a long time, a lot of women can have issues with their gut health and lots of bloating and food sensitivities and things like that. And that's why. So important to note there. The next one is post-biotic. So this is preparation of inanimate microorganisms and or their components that confer a health benefit on the person that's consuming them. So postbiotics are intact, non-viable microbes or cell fragments with or without metabolites that provide a health benefit. So what does all that mean? According to Dr. Will something, I don't even know how to say that last name. That's got to be like Polish or something. Bolswitz. Yeah, that's something. I don't know where that's from. But he's a gastroenterologist. Pre and plus probiotics equal postbiotics. So these postbiotics are not going to stick around. They are a product of the bacteria in your colon being fed foods containing pre and post probiotic bacteria. So postbiotics are like a gift that comes from feeding ourselves that pre and probiotic food. So like if we don't have enough, we're not going to get those postbiotics. We need to have the pre and probiotics to get that postbiotic. So they're a result of fermentation that happens when we consume those pre and probiotics. So postbiotics create short chain fatty acids, and the three main ones are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Is that how to say it? Butyrate?
Propionate and butyrate.
There we go. I don't know who names these things. Honestly, every time I try to read the scientific terms for stuff, I'm like, I'm just gonna call it something else because nobody knows what I'm talking about, and those words are hard to pronounce. Anyways, they work complementary to each other to really help support your body, and they are meant to work together in their proper balance to support our gut health. Butyrate supports the health of cells in the small and large intestine and serve as the preferred food source for the epithelial cells of the gut. So that's like the lining of our gut, that it helps keep those cells nice and healthy. When our epithelial cells are not in a good, healthy position, this is when we start to see the more inflammation, when we start to see the leaky gut and the food sensitivities and the autoimmune conditions. So it's very important to make sure that we're having these postbiotics in our gut to help keep our gut lining very healthy. But if you're missing prebiotics or you're not getting enough probiotics, one or the other, then we can't have these postbiotics. So this is why when we don't have enough carbohydrates and we're not getting enough in our diet and that's not enough prebiotics, then we can't make the postbiotics in our gut, which leads to these issues in our gut. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so to recap here, prebiotics are foods to feed healthy microbes. So before, the food comes before. Probiotics are microbes which have favorable properties. So they are already existing microbes. They're already alive and they can feed in favorable ways our gut. Postbiotics are produced by our gut microbes from having pre and probiotics working together with our gut microbes, creating those postbiotics, those short chain fatty acids. And then synbiotics are a pre and probiotic that work together for a specific benefit. So earlier we mentioned how we can do things to both support and kill the bacteria in our gut, and how we want that perfect balance of good enough bacteria and bad enough bacteria, as well as wanting to have a thriving microbiome full of different bacteria. So the big question is, how do we feed our gut bacteria to create a super robust and diverse microbiome? The very short answer here is fiber. Eating different colors, different kinds of fiber, which if you did not know, there are 17 different kinds of fiber. Most people know like soluble and insoluble, but beyond that, there are 17 different categories of fiber. So having all different kinds of fiber, various types of plants, all of these things are going to help you to foster a gorgeous home for bacteria inside of your stomach, which is, well, not technically your stomach, your colon, but your gut. So all the different kinds of fiber are going to help you to produce different types of short-chain fatty acids in those post-biotic compounds, which we know help to keep our epithelial cells together, which we know that when they're nice and tight together, there's no leaky gut happening. Some of these are going to help to fight off dangerous inflammatory strains of bacteria also because they make the gut more acidic, hence short-chain fatty acid. And that's the first thing that they do is become acidic, which kills those bad guys before they can like latch on and take over and wreak havoc inside of our bodies. So these short chain fatty acids that we get from postbiotics are really going to help to keep a balance between the good and the bad bacteria. So making sure that we've got enough of those prebiotic foods and those probiotic foods is really going to help to create enough of these postbiotics inside of our guts. So for the most robust microbiome, you want to eat as many foods and food groups as possible. I will say that again. For the most robust microbiome, you want to eat as many foods and food groups as possible. So the more foods or food groups you remove, the more you wipe out beneficial bacteria. The fiber-filled foods that you are removing are the only thing that can feed and support those various bacteria. So if you're working to heal your gut and you've removed a food, it should be a temporary removal with the goal of adding back in as many foods as possible. Sure, there are those of us who have true allergies and we should not be consuming a food because we are truly allergic. Many of us have sensitivities that we can actually grow out of based on healing our gut properly by fueling our microbiome with enough prebiotic and probiotic foods. So just remember, removing entire food groups of natural foods is not the route we want to take. It will make things worse for you in the long run.
So, AKA, stop cutting out carbs.
Long story short,
this is really what we're trying to
carbs.
tell you. Yeah, this is really what we're trying to tell you. So like you want to have a variety of everything. Like, so what I like to do is I typically always have berries of some sort because I love berries, but like every week it's like, okay, I'm going to have 2 apples and 2 nectarines. The next week I'm going to have some kiwi and grape. Like I try to alternate some like different varieties of like different colors of foods or citrus fruit versus something else. And like maybe one's a little bit more starchy. I have some bananas or things like that because this is super important. I used to be like pretty sensitive to a lot of foods. Like I would get super gassy and bloated and inflamed. And now through like doing a bit of an elimination and adding stuff in and really focusing on variety, I can eat so much more. There's really, because like before dairy was a super like not happening. I can eat dairy freely now. Like it's great. But like for me, it's like the only things I really can't have are barley, soy, and pea protein. That's it. Like everything else is like free game. Egg white on its own is still a little bit iffy, not great, but like for the most part, I mean, I can still have scrambled eggs and stuff like that, which is awesome. So this is where like when you try to be too strict or you stick to the same foods all the time without adding variety either in like your dinners or you're changing up your breakfasts, like when we stick to the same stuff all the time, it can be really detrimental. And this is where meal plans can like really mess people up. And I don't think women really realize the negative consequences to that, where it's like, okay, you just have these 3 different meals to rotate through or these, like, you know what I mean? And it's like, then you're stuck. and you don't feed things properly, and then you start having more gut issues. Like I've talked to so many women who've done like crazy restrictive diets and followed really specific meal plans. And now they're like, man, I eat anything and I feel terrible. And this is a huge part of that. I know you probably say that with your clients a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about things that kill our gut bacteria. We talked about things that feed our good bacteria that we want to have in our diet. What are the things that can really negatively affect our gut bacteria and decrease things that we actually need? So the first one, which is super common, is antibiotic medication. It literally goes against the bacteria. It inhibits the growth or destroys the organisms in our gut. So if you're someone who's been on antibiotics for a long time, you are going to struggle with gut health. We have clients in our program right now who have been on like antibiotics and antibiotics and antibiotics for like UTIs and all these other things. And now they're in a place where it's like everything bothers them. So we have to start changing things slowly because you have nothing in your gut to help you digest things properly. Then we have stress. Shocking. Cortisol. It leads to inflammation. Inflammation is going to lead to leaky gut, and leaky gut leads to a weakened immune system. And that change just continues and continues and continues, making it worse for our gut bacteria, leading to more gut health issues. We have genetically modified foods can also do this. Tap water. So many places around the world have tap water contaminated with chemicals and heavy metals and medications like hormonal birth control and so much more. So if you live in the US, check out your local tap water by searching EWG, tap water database, and then enter your zip code. This will help you determine what kind of water filtration system is necessary for you. And then from there, how to make that water something your body will be thrilled to consume. The other one is processed sugars. They may leave you feeling happy in the short term, but long term, if we're always having a lot of processed sugars, the donuts, the chips, the chocolate, all those things, it can lead to more negative feelings. Processed sugars and even carbohydrates strip of their nutritional value. So think of like white breads and pastas that just are stripped out of the fiber, like because you lose all the fiber in it. It really decreases that gut diversity. And if that's what we're doing all of the time, can lead to a lot of issues. So when my mom had colon cancer, I took advantage of the week that she was weak because she'd be due her chemo rotation, have one really crappy week and then one really good week. My mom was the queen of Wonder Bread with butter and sugar on it. That was like her favorite breakfast of choice, and Oreos. Loved her, like didn't want whole grain anything. So on her weeks where I had to do the grocery shopping for her was when I took advantage and like slowly went to like 60% whole grain bread and like slowly like mixed things in, and she hated it. But eventually she like built up a palate for it and learned to add more variety and things like that. Because I mean, with colon cancer, we need to make sure that we are, having a healthy gut, very important. And then of course, chemicals and medications, many of which can be found in our beauty products and tap water, which can affect our gut microbiome as well.
Yeah, and then we've already touched on this a bit, but we'll talk about it again to make sure you guys really understand that something that is great at destroying your gut is removing entire food groups for long periods of time. The longer you go without a food or food group, the less and less you will have of the bacteria that is needed to break down that food. So don't be surprised that when you decide to cut out carbs for weight loss, and then when you add them back in, you feel crappy. It's not because you're adding carbs that you feel crappy. It's because you took them out for so long that your body now is like, oh my gosh, we thought that we weren't going to eat this again. How do we break it down? So anytime we remove things, whether it is for healing our gut, or if you really want to cut carbs to lose weight, which please don't, because there are much better ways to do so. But anytime something has been removed, or maybe it's just been a long time since you had something, don't go and have a gigantic portion of it. Like Steph said, like you're probably going to get some bloating, you're probably going to get some gas, you're probably not going to feel amazing. Start slow and build those things back up, because the more we have, the better and happier and more diverse our gut is going to be. So it's not, again, those carbs or that food that made you feel crappy. It's the lack of bacteria that you need in your gut to break down, say, the potatoes or the sourdough bread or anything gluten containing, because so many people decided to go gluten free during the last 10 years because it's just one of those trends, which some of us do need to be gluten free, but not all of us. There are so many whole grains that are so beneficial for us, those prebiotic fibers, guys. So earlier, Steph was talking about that direct highway from our gut to our brains, and it's really important to remember because the food that we put into our mouth travels down to our gut, and then the energy that those foods contain is then the energy that our body and our brain then have to use. So if you think about it, living things like plants, your fiber, they're full of energy. They're quite literally alive, living. So all of that energy is, great higher vibrational energy to keep these things alive. So when we eat these foods, we also absorb that energy. So our gut is happy, leaving our brains happy and our mood more elevated. Whereas if we have something like a cookie or a cracker, though the ingredients in it may have, some of them previously come from living plants, they've been processed many times, they've been heated, and so they're no longer alive, right? So that energy has decreased. It is lower in vibration, right? Because everything in this world is just atoms vibrating, creating energy in some capacity. These processed foods have lower vibrational energy, so when we consume them, our gut feels that, and it sends that signal directly to our brain, lower vibrational, so we can have lower moods as well. So just really important to remember prioritizing those higher vibrational, those more single ingredient, nutrient dense living foods, and finding time for those foods that are cookies, crackers, whatever it is. I love all of them. Honestly, I don't discriminate against the processed foods. So just finding a place for them, not in excess in your diet. Minimally processed foods are going to make you feel better, both mentally and physically, because your gut is going to be happy, and your gut, just like sleep, holds on to everything that goes on in our bodies.
Yeah, and this is why I like preaching the whole 80% whole foods, 20% fun is so important. And it works for each food group, right? There's a lot of quote unquote processed fun foods in the fats category and the carbs category and the protein category. Because having a piece of chicken is different than having a protein bar. Having some olives or cottage cheese is a lot different than having ice cream. Having a baked potato is very different than having a bag of chips. So understanding that is really important. And I think when we think carbs or certain foods, we think of the highly processed stuff and don't think about consuming the whole food versions. Yet when it comes to protein, people are totally fine consuming copious amounts of protein powders and protein bars and the protein Pop-Tarts and the muffins and all those kinds of things, where that's still processed. So you need to be aware of that kind of stuff, because just because it's a quote unquote health food doesn't mean that it's going to give you all those benefits, because lots of those are packed with fiber, right? If you look at a protein wrap, it's 17 grams of fiber, but you look at it and it's where is it coming from? It's not coming from a natural food source. So is it actually beneficial for my gut? Probably not. A lot of people will have a negative reaction to that stuff. So side note to think about. Now we're going to dive into supplements. It's important to know that nothing will ever be as good as the real deal, aka your fiber from carbohydrates for these pre and probiotic needs. There is nothing that's going to be better. So I hope this makes sense with the carbohydrates and the fiber, and that if you take nothing from this, I hope that you figure this out. So supplements can absolutely help support that process, help to maintain a very robust microbiome. And here are some examples of prebiotic supplements, and you will notice that these don't have super crazy names. They are really just condensed encapsulated forms of fiber that are prebiotic in nature, like unmodified potato starch, unmodified tapioca starch, tiger nut flour, inulin, beta glucan, Question mark? Yes. Beta-glucan. And then partially hydrolyzed guar gum. And for any of these supplements, build up slowly, like so slowly over the span of 2 weeks. Many come in powders or in capsules that have powders in them. This makes it very easy to blend these into smoothies, mix it in with oats, stir it into your coffee. You can find lots of different prebiotic supplements at your local drugstore or even your grocery store. And since they come from direct fiber sources, they are easier to find in quality, worth your money at those kinds of stores.
Yeah, so I know that we said like no crazy names, but then beta-glucan and partially hydrolyzed guar gum sound a little bit crazy, but they're actually just like names of different fiber sources. So if that sounds a little crazy to you, I encourage you to look them up so that you can learn a bit more about them. But yeah, prebiotic supplements are definitely a lot easier to just be like, oh, I can grab this thing in the drugstore. Probiotic supplements are a bit more iffy, and we have some specifics that we really want to pay attention to when we are looking at supplements. And we also want to make sure that we are understanding what kind of probiotic bacteria we're putting into our gut. So first, we're going to cover the broad categories, and we're definitely not going to dive into every single individual strain because we would be here for way too long and you guys would be bored. So that is not what we're going to spend our time doing, but it is good to know these broader strains because not all probiotic supplements are created equally. So first we have our lactobacillus strains, and these strains are going to break down and ferment carbohydrates and prebiotics into those short chain fatty acids, which, as we know, these short chain fatty acids are wonderful for our gut. Lactobacillus strains are also in large quantities in our gut naturally, as well as in our vagina, which means that they are the first exposure to beneficial bacteria a baby gets if it is born through the birth canal. But babies born through C-section miss out on this benefit. So just something to be aware of, whether you have children who were born through C-section. I was a C-section baby, or you yourself were born through C-section and maybe you've had gut issues or your kids have gut issues. This is something to know. Maybe it is worthwhile to consider adding some more lactobacillus into your diets. Next, we have bifidobacterium strains. So bifidobacterium has the ability to ferment carbohydrates in our gut. And again, while this fermentation in our guts may not sound like a good thing, we actually need this fermentation process because we humans don't have the ability to break down certain plant and milk carbohydrates that are found in nature. So the bifidobacterium strains allow those plant and milk carbohydrates to ferment, which turns them into those short chain fatty acids, which, as you guys have heard us talk about, are just so great. Another thing that bifidobacterium strains are good at is defending our bodies from infections, specifically by preventing bacteria or viruses from locking onto those epithelial cells inside of our gut, which if they latch on, then they can build a home. So these bifidobacterium strains will prevent them from latching on and building a home.
I also was a C-section baby. Yeah, like my mom always used to tell the story that like she was like ready to go, wanted to push, and I was just like up by her ribs like, no, I'm not leaving. This is where I want to be. So I also was a C-section baby. I was also huge. I was 9 pounds, 12 ounces, which to me is freaking terrifying. I am hoping this little baby boy is not quite as large as I was. Taylor was also a big baby. He was C-section though, or sorry, natural birth though. Okay, so next thing that we're going to talk about here is the yeast-based strains. And while yeast is not a bacteria, it is super beneficial for our gut. And it acts the same way that probiotic bacteria do. So these strains are found on the skin of tropical fruits. They are often used to treat diarrhea, keep the intestinal lining safe from pathogens, and other things that can damage those epithelial cells. So yeast-based strains do a wonderful job at regulating many parts of our immune system as well. So they're actually very good for us. And last but not least, we have our soil-based probiotics. So you may see these as SBO or spore forming on the labels if you're like looking to purchase some. Spore means seed. So when we have a spore forming biotic, that leaves us with a resilient probiotic coated in a shell of sorts almost to kind of protect it. And it protects the probiotic through manufacturing, shelf life, traveling through your GI tract so it gets to where it needs to be. And because of this shell, they are incredibly stable organisms that are dormant until they reach your intestines, where they become active and they colonize quickly.
Yes. So to recap there, we've got lactobacillus strains, bifidobacterium strains, yeast-based strains, and then soil-based or spore-forming SBO strains. So when you are on the market for a probiotic supplement, now you know what different kinds of bacteria to look for and what each can be good for, because like we said, they're not all created equally. Not everybody needs the same things. But now before you go and purchase any probiotic supplement, or honestly any supplement at all, I encourage you to do your own research based on what is your body telling you it needs? What is your body saying, I need some help with this? And then also making sure that you are looking for the quality of these supplements, the accessibility to you, and so on, right? Some things are more available to us here in the States in grocery stores or to order than it is for, say, you guys in Canada or in other countries. So it's going to be different. So we have to do our research. But specifically for probiotic supplements, some guidelines that you want to look out for from brands and on packaging so that you know you're getting what you paid for are the GMP certified label. You want to make sure that there is a genetic ID and validated potency. So this is going to be strain specific and it's going to make sure that your probiotic meets its label claims. And you want to make sure that your probiotic is free of major allergens. So wheat, gluten, soy, milk, casein, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, and soybeans. And yes, your labels on your probiotic supplements will tell you that it is free of these major allergens, or it will tell you like a couple of them. You want to look for all of them. And then you also want to make sure that they are free of artificial colors and preservatives. So just a few guidelines to look at. Kind of sounds like a lot, but it's really just 4 things that we're looking for. The GMP certification, genetic ID, validated potency, free of major allergens, and free of artificial colors and preservatives. So all of these things should be smack on your label or on the website that the brand has for you to order from. And if it has all of these things and it fits the need for your gut and what your body is telling you, you can go ahead and try it.
Yeah, and like I think it's really important to be aware of those things, because if you look at, I don't even know what brand it is, but people have been sending me a few different ones of things that have been popping up that are like popular on social media and TikTok and all these different like weight loss, gut health brand things. Read what it actually says. So the claims, like it'll tell you the claims, like helps with this, helps that, but usually there's little asterisks by it. Then if you scroll down to the bottom of the web page, it'll have like the little asterisk, a little star, and it'll say something along the lines of, these claims have not been proven and tested by the FDA, or things like that. So by following those recommendations that Hannah just listed, you can ensure that these are legit, the real deal. You're getting what it says on the label. It does what it says it's going to do, because there are so many freaking garbage products out there, and juices and cleanses and capsules and powders and stuff. You have to read that. So if like there's a claim and there's an asterisk, scroll down and see what it says. Because like I was on a phone call with Caitlin, one of our customer service manager type people on team, and she was asking me a question about a couple things, and I like copy and pasted, like I did some research, I looked it up, copy and pasted. There was 15 claims, only one was like didn't have a little asterisk by it, but everything else was like cannot like guarantee results, these statements are not tested by the FDA, all this stuff. So like you have to double check. If it seems too good to be true, go and check, especially with products, to make sure that it in fact is what it says. And this is why we're going to give you guys some supplement recommendations right now, or suggestions, because they're a good place to start. They're tested, they're good, they're high quality. You know you're going to get what you get. So here are some recommendations for you. The SBO blend supplements are often going to be the best tolerated, especially if you're someone who has a sensitive gut or you're sensitive to taking things, and it makes them a very good place to start. So some examples of soil-based probiotic blends are Claire Labs Biospora, Microbiome Labs Megasporobiotic, Biobotanical Labs Pro Flora F4R. Oh my gosh, let me say all those again. Number 1, Claire Labs Biospora. That's with a K, not a C. So K for Claire. The second one is Microbiome Labs Megasporobiotic. And the third one, oh, we got balloons going on our screen here because I'm holding up my fingers. And the third one is Biobotanical Labs Pro Flora 4R. I tried to read that way too fast. My brain did not process as quickly as my mouth was trying to speak. The next group is a high CFU supplement. And this is the kind you want to take after any antibiotic or infection repair protocol in order to rebuild that gut back up. Because after you've taken antibiotics, it breaks down your gut. So this is really good to use after that. So you want to use high CFU for 30 to 60 days tops, and then reduce down to 25 to 50 billion CFU. Some examples of these are VSL3. This is the most researched probiotic on the market. It is the most validated, though it is strong, so it can lead to diarrhea initially. So that being said, you have to start small with just like anything and build yourself up. There's also New Beginnings Nutritionals, has both a probiotic 100 and probio premium. So those are two other ones that are really good as well. But again, start slow, because especially if you have a sensitive gut or you've been on those antibiotics and you don't have much there, it can be a lot. So you have to build yourself up slowly. You never just want to jump up. That's never, ever a good idea.
No, definitely not. Especially with those high CFU. So CFU also is colony forming units. That should be on any probiotic supplement you buy, because that CFU is how much there is. So if you don't see those letters, CFU or colony forming units, don't buy it. Don't buy it, run away. But they're definitely super potent and powerful. So yeah, starting slow, building up over time. If it says the serving size is 2 capsules twice a day, do not start there with any of these. You want to start with 1 capsule every other day and see how you do. And then maybe you can do 1 capsule every day. So for some people, it'll literally take 2 or 3 weeks to build up based on how sensitive you are. So moving on to our next category here, we have examples of yeast-based and also combination probiotics. So Biomatrix has their support biotic, and then Pure Encapsulations, their Saccharomyces boulardii is great for a yeast-based strain. And then you'll also see, just bit of information for you, Saccharomyces boulardii, which we talked about earlier, you'll see it written as SAC, SACC period B a lot of times. So you may be well, I can't find the Saccharomyces boulardii. It's written as SAC B, and then they have a whole bunch of specific strains. So they'll prioritize that third word after SAC B. And then Claire Labs, again with a K, they have Biotic Complete. I think that Thur is therapeutic. That's how my brain processes it. But THER-biotic complete. So just really, really, really important for you guys to ingrain in your mind is that taking the same probiotic long-term can be harmful to your gut, because we always want to have that good enough, bad enough balance. So if you're constantly pumping in only a few different kinds of bacteria because you're always taking the same exact form of probiotic, the same bottle, you just keep rebuying it, that's usually going to throw your gut more out of whack as opposed to helping it to be in balance, because you no longer have that good enough, bad enough. You're just you're really, really good and kind of bad. And you've got really, really good of one type of bacteria and not all of them. So rotating through is really helpful. The general rule of thumb is to work through the bottle of one kind that you have and then rotate to the next type. And it's not just a different brand, but specifically the different type of probiotic. So remember, we talked about like those lactobacillus, those bifidobacterium, the Saccharomyces boulardii, those yeast-based strains, those high colony forming unit probiotics, always trying to rotate through, making sure that you're putting in different bacteria into your gut with each cycle of probiotics that you take, if you do take them.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, I've never taken a probiotic in my life. I just eat food. It's great. It's also cheaper.
So much cheaper.
Okay. So much cheaper. So now that you know that antibiotics can really kill some good gut bacteria, even if they are meant to kill the harmful kind, it still just wipes everything out. And you also know that there are different kinds of probiotic supplements and strains out there. So I think it's important to go over the process of how do we repopulate the gut after antibiotics, because there are women that I talk to that are just like one round and then a month later they're on another one and another one, and that's not good. So there are times when harmful infections really do just take over. They leave us sick or at least uncomfortable enough to need some help in knocking it out. So we do need those antibiotics sometimes, right? Like as much as we don't want to take them, sometimes they are necessary. And it is essential to rebuild that gut bacteria as best as you can after any round of antibiotics to avoid needing more in the future. So remember, our gut bacteria is what really helps keep our immune system strong and healthy. So if you go through a round of antibiotics and we don't rebuild that good bacteria in our gut, it's going to be much easier for you to get sick again and have more infections again, which leads you to having to take more antibiotics and more antibiotics down the road. So you need to stop that cycle and repopulate everything properly, which most people do not do, especially if you're also in a diet and you're cutting out your carbohydrates and all these things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one thing that we're going to want to do after taking a round of antibiotics is to feed your body various fiber sources. This, of course, is just on a continuous basis through your whole life. It's going to be the best way to support a healthy gut, like all of the time, but also building up your gut bacteria so that you can have a good, happy, healthy balance of that good enough, bad enough in your gut. But this is going to help to prevent leaky gut. It's going to help to prevent constipation or diarrhea. It can help to prevent fatty liver. And honestly, there's so many more things that can happen from an unfed gut. And this is like unfed and starved of fiber sources, even if there's plenty of calories coming in for like that technical energy intake that we have. But you can still be starving your gut of these fiber sources because the bacteria in your gut need that fiber, those pre and probiotic fiber sources to thrive, to exist. So after you go through a round of antibiotics and also during, right? Like this is an all the time thing. But afterwards, it's more essential to get a rainbow of colors in your diet. So you've probably heard people say, eat the rainbow, but like you don't know why. The reason why is because various whole grains, different nuts and seeds, all of the different colors of plants provide different micronutrients. They have different combinations of pre and probiotic fibers in them, and they're going to help to feed your gut bacteria, rebuild and rebalance the good enough, bad enough bacteria. Additionally, a probiotic supplement taken after you've completed the antibiotics, important to take after. If you're taking probiotics throughout a round of antibiotics, it's essentially just a waste of money because the antibiotics are there to kill the bacteria and the probiotics are there to like feed the bacteria. So they're just canceling each other out. So you just want to make sure that you're taking a probiotic after you're done with your antibiotics or pause while you're on the antibiotics. But it can be a really good idea to take a probiotic supplement afterwards in order to rebuild your gut more quickly. especially if you know you're somebody who gets sick easily, because it is absolutely the combination of those fiber sources and a probiotic supplement that can help to rebuild your gut a bit faster and will likely help to serve you best. So the recommendation for your best gut health on a continuous basis, and this may sound absolutely bonkers, but it's 30 different fiber sources each week. And I remember when I first heard this, I was like, there's no way, like how? And then I start like pretty much consistently each week, I'll just like go through a mental checklist and like, okay, this, like this has 5 different kinds of veggies in it because I have this like frozen veggie blend, and I've got like my 3 different berries, and then I've got like this and this and this. And so it adds up pretty quickly, because like granola, a lot of our clients like to eat like yogurt and granola as a bedtime snack. Sometimes granola has 4 or 5 different kinds of fiber sources in it, from like your oats, your nuts, your seeds, and even dried fruits in there. So that's an easy way to get lots of different fiber sources. And then we can also count spices towards this. So like black pepper, turmeric, cumin, paprika, all of these come from plant sources. So you'll definitely need a bit higher, a higher amount of these spices for them to count towards your fiber sources, but they can count. So yeah, just kind of start taking like a mental checklist as you go through your day, is like, oh, I had 11 different sources of fiber today. If that's what you're eating all week long, okay, where can you sneak some more fiber in? But yeah, even things like salads, if you're somebody who really likes salads, or we're a big bowl team here, so like having different greens and grains in your bowls, if you spend a few more seconds at the grocery store reading the labels of the different greens, some of them have 3 to 5 different kinds of leafy greens in them, instead of you just buying like the bag of baby spinach. Buy spring mix instead, because even though like it's kind of the same thing, you're going to get more sources of fiber. You're going to feed different bacteria in your gut. You're going to help to create a happier environment. So yeah, we're pretty lucky with today's day and age in grocery stores, because it's made it a lot easier to get lots of different fiber sources in a more condensed place. So just take a little bit more time in the grocery store to start looking for these things, and take a mental checklist. If you want to like really go full out with this, like actually write it down and be like, okay, I had this week. Can I swap in this instead? I had red lentils this week. Next week, I'll have green lentils or black lentils. This week in our taco bowls, we had black beans. Maybe next week we have red kidney beans, or you do a mix of them. Small little things like that can make a really big difference in fueling those really great bacteria in your gut.
Yeah, I'm a big like spring mix girl. Love the greens. Love it. Okay, so then starting the day after your antibiotics finish, you work slowly into taking the recommended dose of that high CFU probiotic like VSL3 or one of those pro-bio supplements. If you know you are sensitive to probiotic supplements and don't want to have a chance of experiencing diarrhea, you can start with something like Megaspore Biotic first, and then move to that high CFU after you've finished a bottle of the lower CFU spore-based probiotics, if you want to go the probiotic route. If you go straight into the high CFO, take it for 30 to 60 days. The longer or more intense your antibiotic cycle was, or you've had multiple ones, the longer you can take that high CFU, because your gut will need a lot more support in that case. And after the high CFU, move on to a combination or a yeast-based supplement. Again, take that bottle until it's completely gone, and then move on to the CBO kind.
Yeah, so this is just like important to know that none of these are long-term. Each is like 1 to 2 months, or until your bottle of that supplement is gone. This is something that we see way too frequently, is that people are just constantly taking the same exact probiotic supplement. And they're like, I don't know why I have this gut issue. I don't know why I have this gut issue. I don't know why I have this gut issue, when they didn't have it before they were taking the supplement, and then it's progressively gotten worse, because we got to rotate through them. And probiotics, first and foremost, are not a must have or must take supplement. Steph and I both have said like we don't take them, although they can be really helpful. as long as you rotate through and you go through the right protocol. So make sure that you rotate through all 3 kinds of supplement categories. And then after you have done that, you can be done. Or if you really want to have that extra support and you feel like your body needs that extra bacteria support from those probiotic supplements, just be sure that you continue to rotate through them as you go. So again, rotating through the different kinds, not just different brands, in order to help you to maintain that gut balance. And this is really like that basic format that you want to follow for repopulating your gut after antibiotics. And again, it's not a must, definitely not a must. Supplements are never something that you have to do or have to take, but they can often make it a bit easier, a bit faster to get where we want to be, especially when we're talking about gut health and antibiotics. If you've been through like a round of like a Z-Pak broad spectrum antibiotics, maybe, and you've had good gut health for most of your life, maybe you don't need to do any of this and you just got to focus on the fiber. If you have been on antibiotics 2 or 3 times a year for like your whole life because you get lots of different infections, yeah, taking probiotics is probably going to be something that helps you to get to a point where then you won't need to take them, because that's always the goal, is like do as much as we can from food to help our bodies nutritionally.
Yeah, so like to kind of summarize everything, you do not need to take pre and probiotics. It is not necessary. Staying on the same one forever is going to likely cause issues. So I hope that this like episode has kind of cleared up some of the confusion around all these different like biotics that are out there, especially that there are so many different kinds, how they affect our gut. We want to make sure we have enough good enough and bad enough bacteria. So the thing that I really want you to take away from this is you do not need to take them. You can, but if you don't know why you're taking them or how they're going to benefit you specifically, I don't think you should be doing it. I'm very big on that. Like if you don't know why, do not take it. Read the claims on the websites and all those kinds of things. Nothing is ever going to replace food itself as the most direct way to build and maintain a happy gut for life. And remember, if anything else from this episode, we want you to remember fiber. Fiber, 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 fiber. Where does fiber come from? Fiber comes from carbs. Carbs, carbs, carbs. Eat your freaking carbs. This is like, I swear, I say this all the time. If I could put it on a billboard somewhere for every woman to see, it would be eat your freaking carbs. And no, it doesn't mean donuts and candies and, the white breads. It's mostly whole grain, unprocessed things. Have your oats, have your fruit, your berries, your rice. You can have some pasta. You can have like bread. You can have the nuts and the seeds. Like you can have all of these things. The fruit, the potatoes, the rice, like all those things, you can have them. They are very, very good for you and your gut and will help you so much. And this is why so many women who do keto for years, their gut is so messed up right now. And they're like, but I felt so good on it before. I'm like, yeah, but now you're trying to eat like a normal human being as you should. And because you need carbohydrates to function properly and for your thyroid health and your hormone health and all these things to maintain muscle mass. But you wiped out your gut bacteria from under eating that for so long and eating so low carb and so low fiber, or the fiber you got was so heavily processed from these like quote unquote health food keto bar things. It's not the same thing. So remember, eat the rainbow and avoid eliminating entire food groups, AKA your carbs, unless you are absolutely 100% allergic to them. If you have intolerances, and I think this sounds crazy because you've just been cutting them out for years and years, like just message us. We will help you figure this stuff out. Like we have helped women go from eating 20 grams of carbs a day, which I will like accidentally inhale. Like I don't understand how people eat such little carbs, but like you don't have the bacteria to break that down anymore. So it does take like more time. We need to introduce things slowly. This is why women are like, oh, I just started adding carbs and I feel so bad. It didn't work. I'm like, no, because you went too aggressively in the other direction. Like we tend to just sway so hard. So increase slowly. Prebiotics come from carbs. That's where they come from. You need them. So have your carbohydrates, have your fiber, play around with different fruits or veggies every week. Try and cycle through things to have that variety to help keep things good. Because if you eat the same stuff all the time, AKA why meal plans don't work long term, and can cause gut health issues because you're not getting that variety. And then you just keep feeding certain bacteria more than others. And then you get that imbalance and you have gut health issues. So if you have questions, please reach out, message me, email me. I will help you figure it out. If it's more intense stuff, I will push you to Hannah and connect you to via email, and you guys can hop on a call. Cause like she knows more about like the more specific strainy type stuff. So if there's things that I can't troubleshoot, I'll send them to her. But if you guys have questions, please let me know. Big takeaway out of everything, just eat your freaking carbs. Period. The end. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.